competition, how they blend together, when is the right time to focus a bit more on the competition side and still develop, but with different objectives. And I hope you leave today with some clarity on that topic. But I also just want to acknowledge and hope everybody's staying safe and everyone in your families are healthy as well, because I know we're going through a whole new climate and a different set of circumstances in our current communities. And just the fact that we're able to get online and do something like this during a scenario that we're going through, I really appreciate it. I know League One Ontario appreciates it as well. So thanks again. I'm going to share my screen and take you through a PowerPoint, and I'm going to try to make this interactive as well. There'll be Q&A periods. I know Carm's going to moderate as well, so there'll be some questions and opportunities to go through, the different scenarios and the different concepts. But the first thing I want to start off with is we have to think the future game. Imagine we're now fast forward into 2026. What is the game going to look like in 2026? What's going to change? How are the players going to evolve? How's the competition going to evolve? How's technology going to greater impact the game? And then what does that do for us as technical leaders, coaches? Because obviously we've got to adapt with the times and think, futuristic and be proactive. So if I had to fast forward to 2026, and if I think about our players that we're working with and the players you are working with in League One Ontario, this is about them taking ownership of their pathway, 2026 plus vision. And if I had to think about as a coach or a technical leader, what I could expect, well, I think players are going to need to be more creative, because I think the game as it moves forward is getting more structured, more organized, more tactical, less time, less space, which means players have to make more accurate decisions, have the capacity to problem solve. So I can anticipate that, and I think we would all agree. I also think the mindset, the focus, the concentration is also going to have to evolve. Whistle to whistle performances from players, mentally tuned in. The speed of actions, as you have less time and space, the speed of the actions, the speed of runs, speed of passes, the speed of receiving and releasing the ball, the speed in dribbling, the speed in pressure, these are going to have to increase. But also as the speed increases, players are going to have to be able to maintain that 90 minutes plus, those quality actions. They're going to have to be obviously increasing and advancing and creating new skills and even be greater in terms of how they master the ball. And then obviously the control aspect, the control of obviously the ball, but also emotional control at the same time, which links with the mindset, focus, concentration. So if I had to simplify what the future game could look like, these would be my hypothesis. And now if I think as a coach, from a development point of view, these are the areas I would start to already build within my club framework. These are the things I'd be looking at. If I'm thinking League One, this framework needs to link to the end in mind. When a player is 18 plus, they move into your League One team. This is what the game's going to look like, because your goal is to springboard players, springboard them to professional environments, university environments, national team environments. Okay, because I think that's the big vision. But underpinning all this is culture. We can talk development, competition, but without the right culture and the right belief system, everybody's going to have their own philosophies. And having talked to many people and been fortunate to even go to some professional academies, I can tell you the best ones are where they're aligned from the foundation stage, the base of their club, grassroots, all the way up to the senior team. There's no coincidence that Barcelona back in the 2000s, late 2000s, had 3 players in the top 3 for the Ballon d'Or. No coincidence. That was by design, not by chance. And, to start to establish culture, the first thing is values and beliefs. Creating a shared value system, beliefs in terms of how we develop players and when we introduce competition at the right time, which then drives behaviors and actions. So once you have this base in place, then you'll see coaches living the framework, living the philosophy, and delivering the appropriate content for that stage of player. But also looking at it not just team-wise, but also developing the individual. Because I think in our sport and what again I've seen from best practice across the world is the top clubs, they're developing the individual within the team concept. They're still focusing on that. And I'll share some ideas that I have that I think we can apply back at club level and also even at the League One level with older players. And then once you've got shared values, common beliefs, effective behaviors and actions, helpful behaviors, you get a culture. And when you're in that culture, you don't want to leave. You want to be in that consistently, and things seem to happen organically. Because you can have all the right strategy in the world. Well, however, if you don't have the right culture, you're destined for failure. And we can put things great in place in terms of frameworks and documents, but to bring this alive, it takes leadership. It takes time. And I've on a personal level made a career shift. I was one of the directors with the men's Excel program. Now I've gone back into club football, and I'm working in the grassroots OPDL level. So I can definitely connect and resonate where you're at. This takes leadership. It takes time. It takes energy, but it also takes everyone in the club to take it to the next level. It's not just TDs, it's coaches, it's managers, it's parents, and obviously at the heart of it is the player. And leadership is, the first aspect is model the way. If you really want to inspire people to behave and have a shared value and belief system, model the way and model it consistently, and live by your principles. And then within that, inspire the shared vision. Vision needs to be always presented, communicated. You can never, I always say, you can never under communicate the vision. Every presentation I've been doing back in my community club, they keep hearing this vision. They're probably tired of hearing it, but at least they know it inside out. That if you went to a coach, I'm very confident they can tell you what the vision is. So from modeling the way, inspiring a shared vision, the next thing is encouraging the heart. And the heart being the passion, the love, and the purity of why we do what we do. Because that to me then links to these last two pillars. Because if you have model the way, inspire shared vision, people embracing the love and passion of what they do, then people feel more comfortable to enable others to act, enable their assistants, their managers, even their, at an even greater level, the players to take ownership of the environment. So now you're creating leaders within your team, within your club, but also being comfortable that people can challenge the process. Because if we all have shared values and beliefs, and people are providing and living effective and helpful behaviors and actions, challenging the process becomes a constructive process. People feel safe. People feel that they can embrace different ideas. People don't feel like they're being judged and undermined. Okay, so that to me is a big piece. And then within this, looking at it from a big picture overview, a performance culture. And this is where things link to more youth, but also League One level teams and players, is creating the environment. That's pillar number one, environment. And that's the training environment. That is the on and off field culture, in games, in training, in dressing rooms, in team meetings, and even the informal events that happen. And in encouraging the growth mindset, that curiosity to always want to know more. And then the second pillar comes from us. It's the coaching. It's our on-field delivery. It's how we can give the right feedback at the right time. with the right approach, and giving that performance feedback, that dialogue with players, but also getting them to analyze and reflect, and then the individual development, and individual development not only being the player, but also the person, the holistic approach. And then the third part is competition. So if you got a good environment, high performing environment, coaching that's adaptable, willing to work with the individual, given the right detail at the right time with the right approach, competition now becomes meaningful. It becomes meaningful because as a coach, you want to see if all the work in the environment, the training, the detail, the feedback is actually enhancing the performance. You use competition to benchmark performance, just as a gauge to see where we're at, where have we improved, what's going to drive the next week's training, what's going to drive the feedback that I give the team individually, collectively, or in units. Okay. And again, it's a matter of perspective. It's a matter of perspective. And I'll go through this competition piece a bit more to give further clarity. But again, when I think performance culture, and again, from experience, pillar 1, environment, pillar 2, coaching, pillar 3, competition. And then within your club's framework and culture, I think people need to not only see the now, but they need to also have, like I called the future game, they also need to see the big picture, the goals, and then the long-term process. Okay, and this is just an example from the club I'm presently at, just an example of 2020 being a review year, with me being new and just getting more familiar, but then having some key developments from 2020 to 2024. So I encourage that. Set your goals. This could also be used in a team. How are we going to develop our League One program year by year? If I'm a new franchise in the league, maybe it's to finish in the mid-table point, to have a progression of players move on to other environments. That could be success. To then build in year 2, year 3, year 4. I think, or develop a core group of players, that you think are going to be part of your club for the next 4 or 5 years, and be the pillars for what you're trying to develop. So just again, I recommend that. But also, when I think big picture and where League One sits, I think the real objective that can help and motivate everybody is we're all here to strive to see more players in national team age group squads. I know there's players that have been in my hands at a national level that were playing League One. And kudos to you guys for providing the right environment to help elevate them and grow them. And that's males, but also on the female side too. I've seen female and male players come through this league. So it's done a great job in terms of closing a gap that we've had, a systematic gap. And that was after 18, what happens next? And I feel like League One Ontario has helped that. Now with CPL in place, the MLS expanding, within the academies and growing and evolving in that space, I feel like our gaps are starting to close year by year. And then with the future focus of 2026 Home World Cup, that's going to change the game forever in Canada. I really believe that will. And we all got to be ready and geared towards helping that and maximizing that opportunity. And then I feel another objective is, can we get more players in pro clubs? I think the development part from a League One perspective is, can we springboard these players? And, I know on the male side, there's been players that have springboarded, and I know on the female side as well. So again, just that's something to think about, even though you're at a League One level, which is more, you can say 17 plus, getting more into the senior level, pathway, stream in terms of where the players are at. We still got to look at where we're developing players to springboard and progress. So that's my intro part. I'm going to get into other aspects, development versus competition, and some core principles. But if you just want to spend a minute just in the chat, you can provide some comments in the chat, or if you feel confident to ask questions, you can unmute your microphone, and then we can have some back and forth dialogue. So I'll just give you a minute if you want to type in the chat. If you want to, again, unmute your microphone, this is a good window for that.
Perfect, Joey, and thank you so much for that introduction. And the pathway aspect of this presentation is very interesting. We are sitting on a gold mine. I have said that gold mine, not gold mine as well, hopefully. But yeah, there's something around elevating League One's level, the technical standards. Anybody that's been part of, especially the women's division as well as the men's division standards, we're looking to improve that all the time so that one day we do become, a league where we are producing players, progressing them, and not necessarily in one linear way. It's, success for players is very, very different, that definition. And some of it could be to Europe. Some of it could be to your point, youth national team players, keeping fit during the summer, providing that really professional experience for our players. And that's what we aspire every year to continue to improve on. So there's been a great commitment from the license holders so far to really help that. And that's what we all want to see. We want to see players, men, women, living their dreams. And we want to be even, a vehicle for that, a place where they can sharpen their teeth, hone their skill, and progress out, right? We're not going to sit here and say, 4-month season is the answer, but a 4-month season can make or break and make a big deal in a player's career. So we have a very important part to play in that. So thank you for that very important introduction, Joey. And I'll take a look at the chat, see if there are any questions. No questions have come through. If you don't want to turn on your mic or ask any questions, no problem. Joey can proceed.
Okay, well, I'll keep cracking on, everyone. And then as things come to mind, there'll be another window for Q&A, and then we'll have one right at the end. So development versus competition. When we think about principles and principles within a club framework and a club pathway, I think it's accumulation of hours and touches. So we talk development, it's high ball rolling time in training with high repetitions. Try to do as many things with the ball with decision making to advance the skill set and game understanding. And I think also when you're dealing at League One level, that doesn't change. Your actual window of opportunity is even smaller because you got them in a condensed window. So you can't waste a minute. Early engagement, when we get players at a young age, it's important that they fall in love with the game. Because if they fall in love with the game in terms of their first touches, they'll love the game forever. That's my belief. So when we're talking about development, that's a key pillar. Early engagement, develop the love and passion for the game. And then for us, when we're dealing with older players, it's about igniting that fire within them, igniting that passion that they had when they first started to play and maintaining that. And I think we can all agree the best players to coach are the ones that drive the coach, not that the coach drives them. And again, if we can inspire that passion at a young age, they'll be driving us. And there's no better player to coach than those ones that are self-driven. And then an aligned pathway. So League One being in most clubs the final stage in the pathway, but then everything else happening underneath to support that, to sustain that. Okay. And again, I've used this at my club is to help progress more players in the higher levels. And I would love for our club at one point to eventually have a League One and to build towards that. So that's part of our gap analysis that we want to eventually be having League One in place. But again, meeting the needs of players across the different stages. So you guys that are on the call today, fantastic, because you have that next layer, 18 plus, 17 plus, and you can gradually build. And then within the aligned pathways, your club framework. So clearly knowing what the stages of development are. What are the outcomes, for a player that's 8, 9, 10 versus a player who's 16, 17, 18. All with the goal to help players reach their full potential. And reaching their full potential requires a four-corner approach, because we just focus on the X's and O's and the physical development, but forget about the software of a player, the emotional side, the mental side. Eventually, these areas, especially as they get older, are going to be challenged. They're going to be stretched. And unless we've given them the software to be ready for that and the experience to be ready for that, that could be a gap that holds them back. So they could have the hardware, but with no software, they could break down. So it's developing the player and person, holistic approach. So this is the principles that I think connect to all stages: grassroots, representative teams, OPDL teams, League One, but obviously with different objectives. And then, this is just an example pathway. I think this is probably something very similar to what most clubs would have in place: pathways for all talent levels, starting at grassroots, being the entry age, but then having clear stages of the initiation, the first touches, the foundation of skills, and then the improvement of skills. And then you're going to have players that, in your clubs are going to move into recreational environments, and that's fine. They just want to stay active for life. Then there's going to be other players who are going to want to go into representative teams. And that's where, in our clubs, we need to be providing them with more advanced stages of development, higher demands in terms of the technical, tactical excellence, the physical standards, and in the growth in the mental and social emotional space. But then where we all kind of sit is, some League One franchises have OPDL and can connect. So then they can connect the advancement stage with what I call excellence stage. If you're just a standalone League One club, then you're getting players at that excellence stage. And that has different objectives to what, we would drive at a grassroots stage, but it also has a different set of principles and objectives to what you would deliver at a U13, 16 stage. But it's important that everything connects. So even in a club, for example, let's say I had a player who's in my OPDL squad, my U17s. If you know the framework and the principles and the philosophy similar, when they come in and out of OPDL to League One, it's almost seamless. The information's very similar. The language being used is very similar. The game models are very similar. And I think that will help in terms of sustaining a future within your League One club, because then the pipeline will just be coming through and funneling through every single year. You may not even have enough for, you might not have enough roster spots for the demand, and that's where the League One reserves comes in. And that's been a great initiative to, again, broaden the base at the 17 plus. And then, the goal after they've come through these environments is, again, to move to professional, collegiate, national team, and in some cases, even in the provincial setups with, I know not this year, we don't have Canada Games, but next year there's Canada Games, which is a U17 competition. And then, building on this development versus competition. So imagine this is a continuum of a player. They start at U8 in terms of, grassroots and select programs and clubs, and then U18 plus. And if I had to put a visual here, I think this would be the best way to describe the difference between the importance of development and competition. So as you can see, from 8 to about 13, development is high priority. Competition is just a means to help support the development. But then as players start to get U14 plus, development is still there. You're never going to stop developing, but also competition starts to ramp up a bit. And then by 18 plus, depending on what level, competition is going to be, that's in university, trying to win an NCAA championship, trying to win a League One championship, trying to win an MLS Cup. Obviously, those are core objectives when you move into higher levels, and that's the expectation. You never do, though, stop developing, whether that's individually or within a team concept. But the end goal is to win that game on the weekend, and that's just the nature of the higher levels. But now imagine I flip these. I put competition here and I put development here. So at 8 to 14, all we're trying to do is just compete. Go out and win those festivals. Go out and win those tournaments. Go out and win all these different competitions. And then at U14, we notice our players struggle to control the ball. Our players lack vision and awareness. They have all these performance gaps. And now we're trying to reverse engineer and say, okay, well, let's start developing them now. Now we got to, do all this skill work and develop their game understanding and game IQ. It just doesn't work. You can't just go and reverse engineer habits that have been cemented at this base level. So that's why development is key. Because then once they get, at the right age, in the right stage, in the right time, they're ready for competition. They're ready to absorb tactical and match strategies. They have the physical base to execute that consistently, along with the skills in decision making. And then, I'm not going to go too deep into this, but this is just an example of a club's pathway. At the younger ages, they have a certain amount of hours that they're clocking per year. At an OPDL club, or even League One per se, as they start to move forward, you're getting them for a concentrated period. I know OPDL, you're clocking about 240 plus hours a year. So that would accumulate from U8 to U18 to be 2,120 contact hours. To me, that's not enough to develop a player at the world-class level. And, at all pathways, I've put plus. And the plus means that players are doing extra work outside of the environment. If there's anything that we're benefiting from right now, is the fact that players have to take complete ownership of what they're doing. Because if they're just relying on us coaches to provide them with the exercises, the instruction, the feedback, right now it's very impossible with social distancing in place. So I think the beauty of the outcomes that we're gonna benefit from in the future is the fact that players are going to be more, so they're going to take more ownership of their own development. So they're not just going to clock 2,120 hours, they're going to accumulate way more, because excellence takes time. I know they used to say 10,000 hours to reach elite performance. For some people, that could be 6,000. For some, it might be 15,000. It's just the only thing we know, it takes time. It takes deliberate work. So don't waste a minute, especially again in your environments where you have players for short windows. It's got to be highly deliberate training to help them prepare, to develop a team concept, but also, again, support individual development. And the four-corner approach being critical to any stage of development, enhancing the technical, tactical, the physical, the mental, the social emotional, all in a holistic and organic way. So when you're planning training sessions, try to incorporate all four. So even if I'm working on a small set of game, 5v5 with targets, well, what is the mental part? What is the social emotional part? What are the key partnerships they need to connect with? What is the physical demands in terms of speed, endurance, mobility, and then obviously the technical, tactical, the decisions and the different skills under pressure they have to perform. And here's some examples. So this is what I would call foundation stage, four corners, and the priorities. And this is a development stage, not what I would call a competitive stage. And you can see the training would all be individual, 1v1 attacking, dribbling, ball mastery, vision and awareness. And then simple game principles of, we have the ball, get wide, make the pitch big. We don't have the ball, get nice and tight. And then you look at the other corners, physical, you want to keep them moving, develop coordination, Mental's about love for soccer, love for sport, varied activities because they have short attention spans, and a positive experience. But if we take senior level principles into a development stage, now we're talking performance under pressure. At a development stage, performance under pressure isn't the objective. I think we'd all agree love for soccer, sport, and keeping them engaged is a key thing for a good experience. If I'm working with senior level, team building becomes a key component, not at a development age. And then obviously at an older age, the maintaining the actions, the quality actions, the endurance, that's important. And at a younger age, we just want to keep them moving, keep them active. But things change now. If I'm at excellence stage where League One would sit, this would be my objectives. I'd be very focused on team tactics. I'd be trying to cement my tactical identity year after year after year. Again, if that's being developed across the whole club, then you're getting players with a base understanding. I'd be developing my game models, whether that's model 1, model 2, model 3, depending on how you structure it. Some clubs might have one model, some might have multiple. I'd be working in position specific type training because now players are ready to specialize in either one or in some cases maybe they're a hybrid, but most specialize in a specific position. I also think at a League One level, you can never stop working on technical habits. No matter what age, players still need to refine and still sharpen the saw. And then my principles of play, which gives players a broader understanding of our sport. And then if I'm looking at it from a physical point of view, now the training becomes way more deliberate. Even when I'm working a small set of games, I'm still trying to develop the physical corner. You're probably even asking your players to do stuff in the gym with fitness trainers to enhance the strength, power, and then from on-field performance, the ability to have high-speed actions, but then maintain them for a 90-minute game. And then at the older ages, resilience, performance under pressure, competitiveness is a key piece along with teamwork. We, not me. And then social emotional love for the club. If they come through your club for the full pathway, they probably live and breathe your badge. Team building exercises, and then developing leadership within your team. So you can see how things completely shift in terms of the focus at a foundation development stage versus where you guys are at an excellent stage. Preparing players to be ready week after week after week in competition. But again, never forgetting you are still developing your players across four corners and with clear objectives. And then, looking at individual development, some of you might be doing this. Some clubs might be thinking, yes, this is something that you've wanted to implement. I think at all stages, all levels of the pathways, we should be doing individual development plans. At younger ages, I would call it individual skill plans. If it's an older age, I would call it individual development plans. Skill plans, the difference would be it's all about on the ball stuff, where development plans could be across all four corners. And this is just an example that I put together. I believe it's important for players to understand their own identity, how they play, what makes them special. So this helps their self-awareness. What are their strengths? And what are their start doings, their growth areas? What do they need to improve? Because you never do stop growing. And again, this could be across the four corners. And then having them every month reevaluate. Did I reach my goal? Did I reach my target? Did I partially reach it and need to maybe tweak the objective? And if I didn't reach it at all, well, then obviously that needs to transfer to the next month. So I'd have players update these every month. And then I have them pick a role model, someone that they can study and watch and analyze for best practice. So this way they have a clear role model that, again, when they go do their training, I mean, they can try to mimic some of the skills that they've analyzed and discovered. But then taking this individual development plan and giving players windows within your training week, whether that's pre-training, post-training, maybe a 30-minute window before every training where players can work on their IDPs, or maybe post-training, giving them a 30-minute window. I think it's important that now you give them the opportunity to actually take ownership. And at that age, 17 plus, players have the maturity to actually deliver that sort of type of training, that real self-owned and deliberate type of work. So again, I wanted to share that with you. Just as something that, again, you might want to take, or you're already presently doing. Well, what I've been pushing in my club is a global player profile, and this is regardless of age. These are four areas that I would love to see every player in our club be competent at the very least, and in some of them excellent by the time they leave us. The first one being their ability to dominate the ball. And this is everything from running and dribbling, turning, finishing, crossing, passing, combination plays, everything to do with the in possession, but also the ability to intercept, to have, the ability to tackle, to regain. So everything in the on the ball part. But then the ability to 1v1 duels as another pillar, 1v1 attacking, defending, but also in the air. Soccer speed, which you've heard about in other slides. And then a key component is high game intelligence. So I think we got to be clear that we can have, a big framework and all these objectives and can-dos statements for each stage of development. But I think we got to bring it back to an overview level. And I feel this is, if I had a player in my club or have players from my club leaving us, but are competent and maybe excellent in some of these, we've done a good job. We've done a very good job. And I think League One plays a role as well, because you never stop learning, especially this piece here, the game intelligence. What a great opportunity to provide players with an experience where it's going to challenge their decision-making capacity, their tactical understanding, their positional play, but also the tempo, playing at a higher tempo, overloading them physically, which then over time they adapt. 1v1 duels, dealing with opponents that are older than them, that are physically stronger. And then obviously, the environment, the matches, the competition are going to really challenge their ability on the ball. So that's a bit more of the competition development principles, concepts. What's the right objective based on the stage that a player is at? What's the right time for competition to really ramp it up? Not to say that competition at a young age isn't necessary. I think, as you saw, it's one of my three pillars in culture. It's, again, the perspective, the process versus outcome. Younger, process is paramount. At the older age, outcome becomes a focus point, although I never think you leave the process behind. And again, building on this, I'm just going to go through a little bit of coach methodology. But I think we had a couple of questions that might have popped up in the chat.
No, Joey, it was just more me encouraging people to do so. But we will continue to keep that open. And if anybody, we'll give natural pauses. And if anybody would like to turn on their mic and ask a question, please definitely go ahead.
Okay, amazing. All right, so coaching methodology. I think at a League One level, you never stop inspiring and igniting that passion, but the empowerment piece is key. You're dealing with adults, pretty much, or teenagers moving to adulthood, so they're ready to take that leadership, and the more we can empower them, again, I think the more we spark that love for the game. But then, that's at the center of it, passion and empowerment. And then outside of that is the 5 C's: developing control, control the ball, but also emotional control. Developing commitment. Again, if players are passionate, love the club, love the environment, love the game, and feel part of it, you'll see that commitment. And I know when you're dealing with older level players, this is a key thing. And that's why the philosophy, the culture, the environment needs to just make it almost something that they regret not coming. They regret missing a practice. They regret maybe not spending the extra time to do their strength and conditioning. So develop the commitment, develop the creativity to solve problems, develop the confidence, the self-belief, and to develop the cooperation where they work well with others. So that's the 5 C's within this, example philosophy. But then what sits in the outer ring is 4 other pillars. Again, culture, environment will keep everything inside under control, intact, having the right processes and systems in place, a strategy and vision for where you want to go as a team, as a program, and then the methodology and the coaching detail to continue to evolve, again, what's happening inside of this circle. And then player-centered environments. This is, again, something that applies League One at the development stage. You're going to have players playing up probably from OPDL in some cases to 17s plus. Your OPDL reserve team playing up, again, depending on the age of player, and their four-corner readiness is a big piece. If they're four-corner ready and they're showing that quality to play and the performance to play up at a League One level, or to move from your reserve to your League One, I think that's a key indicator. Where we've got to be very careful, and this is from experiences, moving players too quickly. Sometimes when we try to accelerate the development too fast, we take away some of the key building blocks that players organically get in their development. So always be mindful of the maturity part. They may be high performing on the field, but if they lack some maturity, by accelerating them, it could affect them long term. I've already dived into this individual development, and in the rotations of positions at a development age, I think giving players a broader understanding of the game is key. But at an older age, you're starting to develop position specific roles and understanding. And I think regardless of age, the player is at the heart of every decision. You're trying to make the best decisions based on what's right for the player. And then competition is a motivational tool. I think this doesn't apply in just match play. I also believe in training. Keeping score is key, because if you keep score, it's amazing how the intensity increases. Even when I've been doing virtual trainings, if I give them a target in terms of the repetitions and the timeline, I can just see from watching the Zoom meeting that the speeds increase. Competition, again, to benchmark performance, to see where we're at. I highly recommend, especially at League One level, where I know you've got tools and video and they're capturing the games, to do game analysis, to sit players in meetings or over Zoom meets and review the games and create that shared understanding of where the team's at. And in a games program as well, putting a games program when you're looking at your scheduling that's going to challenge your group. I think that's something that if I'm looking at an annual plan, periodized plan for League One, I would definitely be methodical with how I structure my games preseason, maybe during some off windows or lighter windows, maybe some friendly games that, again, will stretch the boundaries of your players. And then,
Joey, we have a very good question from Mirko, dear friend. It applies, I think, right now. I think it's a good time to ask. So Mirko asked, when driving your culture and implementing the processes that are required to succeed, which you're describing, how do you go about developing the person that can live and deliver the culture, especially finding the balance between a shared vision and challenging the process?
Absolutely. So I think when you're talking about, exactly, there's a lot of things there. Developing the person, not just the player. Developing a culture where it's living your identity, values, beliefs. And I think the first part is, if I come into a club and I say, guys, can you imagine if I come into a club and I go, here's the PowerPoint, here's the framework, this is what we're doing, and you guys have to comply by it.
Hmm.
I think I'm going to get a lot of resistance. I
Yeah.
think people are going to be like, wow, this is a big culture shock. It's not a helpful thing. It's a culture shock. I think by engaging the players, getting their feedback, getting them to almost co-design
Hmm.
what we're doing, so they feel part of it. Then the fact that they've co-designed it, it's almost them driving the what the values and beliefs are, and we facilitate that process. Now you can hold them accountable to do what they said they were going to do. And I
Yes.
think that's a key thing. And then that starts to drive your culture, because you're going to have natural leaders in your group that, once you've gone through that sort of process, shared vision, shared values and beliefs, they'll make sure that that's sustained in your culture, sustained in your environment. And what will happen is, the people that can't live in that, eventually they'll fade away, and you'll keep having more and more and more of people that want to buy into what you're doing.
Yeah. Brilliant, Joey. So what I'm hearing is co-delivering the process, engagement, empowerment, and challenging the process is not necessarily the first thing they want to do. It's almost like a slow drip, and eventually you get to a level of trust where you can do so. That makes a lot of sense. Thank you, Joey, for answering that, and we'll let you keep going.
No problem. And I like what you just said there about trust. Think of it, if you have a staff member or an assistant coach that you have high trust, when they give you critical feedback, you take it in a whole different perspective, and you're way more open-minded than when it's someone who maybe don't have the same trust or the same relationship. So I think that's the key thing. Build the trust first. And I think by, I guess you could say, enabling others to act to help support what you're doing,
Hmm.
goes a long way.
That's perfect. No, thank you so much, Joey. That's clear. Okay, we'll let you keep going.
Thank you. And I'm not going to dive too much in this. I think it's pretty clear what this diagram's highlighting. When you're dealing with excellent stage, League One level, you're working in all four of these areas: your technical habits, your identity, your principles of play, and then position specific. But you notice, especially this one here, position specific, you only start to introduce that probably when players start to get 15, 16, you start to specialize positionally. But by 16, 17, you have a good idea what their roles are, or if they're a hybrid player. You notice as well, I've left the identity in terms of a full priority till the advancement stage. At the younger ages, you want to keep things broader, more principle based, and try to limit the structure. It's about them discovering solutions. Then when they get older, they can start to understand different ways of building up structures that way. I think at the younger ages, it's them understanding the principles of support, with mobility, rather than them being on this blade of grass at this time. And you notice technical habits, all stages, all ages. That never evaporates. And now getting into a little bit more of, like, what is a game model? Like, if I was in a League One club and trying to develop a game model, how would I do that? How would I do it across the club? So again, creating shared mental models of how we look at the game. The first one being the pitch geography. I really like the four zones. I think it's clear. I think you can teach players what principles underpin your attacking buildup and identity in zone one, what changes in zone two, zone three, zone four. So, for example, if I was working in my attacking identity, I would say zone one is my buildup. That's where I'm building my attack in a general way. Against a low block, it might be zone two, but generally it's zone one. Zone two would be where I'm trying to progress possession, trying to link my attack to break lines, to unbalance the opponent. And then zone three would be more my creation phase, where I'm trying to get into goal scoring positions, either wide or centrally. And then zone four is about finishing actions and scoring. So that's how I would look at interpreting the game and working with my players is the zones, and I would use as a training tool. I'd use it at halftime, full time, to give players details, even pregame, in terms of what their roles and responsibilities are. And then you can see here I've got model 1, 4-3-3. I think every club needs a base model. If I was starting a new League One franchise, I'd have one base model that I would start off with and then look to evolve it to maybe model 2, model 3. So that's how I would look at it from zones. I also believe in vertical channels, and I like the 5 vertical channels. So you got a wide channel, you've got the half spaces, the interior channel, and then you've got the central channel. Okay. Now, how the proximity of these can change. This 18 is a little bit narrow on this diagram, so they might be a little bit more inner or wider. But again, I like the five channels, which helps with positional play. So if I'm a fullback, I don't want my winger and my fullback to be in the same vertical channel, because it's then straight passes for straight runs, which is easy to pressure. Where I like them to be on opposites, one in the wider, one in the interior. So you get clear passing lanes, and it opens up different options. And then another piece that sits within your game model is knowing your profiles. We're going to have different profiles in our teams. And, I'll use the example of the back four. You might have soldier center backs or a fluid center back who's very good in the buildup. You might have fullbacks who are more attack minded, love to get forward, or almost like wingers. They like to create those wide overloads. Or I might have my fullback who's stay home, wants to win the 1v1. And then I think in midfield, in your game model, you need a balance of profiles. I always think you need at least one box to box who's got the engine to do the volume of work. That creative midfielder who can find those solutions to unlock any defensive organization. And then a holding midfielder, ideally they've got a combination of both. Sometimes you got more dominance in one or the other, but they're either a very good dictator or destroyer. And like I said, ideally they have a mix of both. Your number 9s, again, I would like to have probably 2 9s, one who's maybe more of a target, who can hold the ball up fantastic in the air, and then another who's more of a false 9 that can come in central areas and overload the midfield area. And then if I had to look at wingers, probably one who's maybe more fixed, loves to stay wide, Arjen Robben, isolate 1v1, or my loose type winger who likes to float and come into awkward areas to create positional problems for the opposition. So again, I would look at how I interpret the game from a geography perspective. What are my game models? And then what are my profiles? And then, that helps you as you're moving players away from, again, if you have a club pathway or if you're in this excellent stage already with no youth development underneath, you can then evolve, but at least they've got a base. And I always think start with one. If I'm a new club, start with one and then start to maybe evolve. And at a certain point, once you feel comfortable that they understand your model 1 to a model 2, a model 3. And the goal that I've set in my club is by the time they leave us, I want them to have learned at least 2 game models. Because who knows, they could be going to another club and it's a 3-5-2. And at least if we've given them some familiarity and experience, we're again helping their development. And same thing at League One. If you're working within different models where they can adapt in game to playing from a 4-3-3 to a 4-diamond-2 or 3-5-2, that's fantastic. Because if they go into pro clubs, I know from experience, and we've all seen how the modern games evolve. They're changing models within games, and they also change models when they're attacking and defending. But to simplify this is always know the qualities of players you have. What are the profiles you have in your team? And then what is your identity that you want your club and team and players to live? All right, so we're making some great time here, and you know, I feel like we've got through quite a bit of content, and I'm gonna just end with one last slide, and then we'll open it up to Q&A. All right, is how do you operationalize that? So if I'm in competition now, and I'm thinking about, okay, I got a game on a weekend. If I was in your shoes, what would I try to do? I would try to simplify the battlefield as much as I can. So I'd have my identity, and this would be clear, and this is across all 4 moments of the game. So that's the base. And then I like to work in threes. I think try to keep things in threes. Like we've got 3 ways of building our attacks, 3 ways of pressing, three behaviors in attacking transition, and 3 behaviors in defending transition. So this could be the script that you use for your game day. This could be a poster that you create that you put in the walls of the dressing room. Again, I think this is a way that you can take the concept and then bring it into a strategy. So, for example, 3 ways of building up. I can build up with a back 4. So depending on what structure the opponent's using, if I'm again in a competition mode, I'd be trying to look at which is the best structure and the best options to play my first phase of build up. So if I'm against the front 3, I'd probably be looking at my center backs because they have the numerical superiority 2v1 on the number 9. If I'm up against the front 2, then I would want to use it and have the option of going to a back 3 where my holding midfielder would drop between my center backs. So now I've got a +1 against their front 2. And then what I think is you've got to have a third, because if the other team's got a great pressing strategy, I think where you can cause positional problems for them is by having rotations, whether that's a midfielder coming low and rotating with the fullback, wingers rotating with fullbacks, midfield rotations, winger and midfield rotations, false nines. You can create different rotations that, again, create positional problems and change the picture of what you're trying to do and how you're trying to penetrate. Okay, and then in competition, what I'd be looking at is what are our qualities and strengths? What is our tactical identity? Always start with us. Then from there, I look at the opposition strengths and weaknesses. The game's about balance. You want to always stay in balance. So even when you're attacking, I'd always want to make sure I've got a good balance in terms of coverage. If we lose it, we don't get counterattacked. Other things like climate, the wind, the pitch conditions, state of game, goal up, goal down. And then if you're ever in 10 players strategies, obviously things are going to change what you do. So that's kind of a 1-page overview of strategies. There's way more detail that we can all obviously analyze, but I think trying to simplify the battlefield when you go into competition for your players is key. And again, I find the rule of 3 to be a great way of communicating that. I've also seen from experience when I'm in competition and I'm doing team meetings, try to target your meetings 15, 20 minutes. With the men's national team, that's kind of our bandwidth. We realize is about 15 minutes. We have 15 minutes to be clear, concise, and give the right detail. Or else if it gets too laborious, Um, it becomes A, too much information, but also B, players tune out. All right. So again, I just want to say be curious about how you design your identity and be curious with what you're going to do in terms of your 4 moment strategies. And it all stems back to the players you have, the vision, and what is your long-term objective.
Okay, so Joey, thank you so much for all the incredible information. You have just been very successful in making me, and I'm sure everyone on this call, want to get back out on the pitch even sooner than we had before. So this is really exciting stuff, and you've given some real gems and nuggets for people to take back, look at their own systems and processes, theories, philosophies, and really take time to work on what you have, because you've taken some really complex, potentially complex topics and made them simple, bite-size, like I knew you would, where people can start to wrap their brain around how they're going to do it for themselves. So, thank you so much, Joey. We do have 2 questions. One came to me privately, and one for the group. We have it from Eva. We have Joey. What's your thoughts on accelerating a player to League One level that may be underage? And when we say underage, we've really had a large discussion around what is underage. We're talking about really 04s, that sort of brink player. Anything below an 04 this year would be a 16-year-old. Yeah, we wouldn't really look too closely into at this point in the process. But how do you feel about that anyway, Joey?
I think first off, coming from working with John, where he was very much about, if you're good enough, you're ready, you're old enough. That was one of his philosophies, and I believe in what he says, and in that principle itself. I think if a player is good enough, they're old enough, and we should move them and challenge them. I think where things become, how can you say, a little bit in the gray, is whether they have the maturity, that if we're pushing them too much too soon. And I think within your clubs is that, if you feel a player is demonstrating, call them up, give them some opportunities, see how they handle and navigate being around an older team, older level competition,
Mm-hmm.
and make it gradual. Test the waters a bit. I know we've done that, where we bring in players as guests to come in with the senior team, and then we see how these youth players were again navigating amongst senior team players, and then that helped us if we felt they were ready to be called up officially into camps, and then eventually get capped at a senior level when they were probably 17, 18 years old. So I think that's something that I would highly recommend, is make it gradual, see how they navigate, because they may look ready at their own age, but you gotta until you see it, you never really know. And but I do believe in it. I think it's a great way of advancing players. But again, just always be mindful that the maturity piece could be something that could hinder the experience.
Yes, and so to your point, Joey, it's been extensive. We've developed 2 ways specifically for 04s to advance into League One reserves and the full team, and they're 2 very different processes. If we have OPDL provincial teams that have acknowledged, or Rex, or other academies, TFC, other things, right? If that's already happened for that player, they're sort of along the pathway, they've been identified. But for the ones that haven't been identified, and it doesn't mean that the system's going to capture every single player, right? We do have a 4-corner process, and Dr. Tracy Vaillancourt wrote a memo for us, which does describe what you just did about the social emotional implications of calling up a player who may not be ready for an adult or senior environment, conversations, long bus rides, things of that nature. So it's not just because they're technically and tactically competent. It's a 4-corner approach as to why we would allow a younger player to play up. It's for player safety and well-being. And that's where we are at in the process as a league. So thank you for your opinion on that, Joey. And thanks for the question, Eva. Very, very relevant and good question. So the next question was around metrics, which I know you're extremely passionate about, and how do you measure success at the performance level? I know you're going to answer that very, very well, but just to let everybody know, that is exactly what webinar 4 and webinar 5 are about. MSA will come on and teach us about their platform, how they code a game, and then Ollie Gage and Aaron Nielsen will come on and teach us how to use that information to help develop your team and philosophy. But Joey, if you could add a little bit of light on how you use metrics for performance.
No problem. Perfect. It actually kind of aligns with Eva's question. I think you need indicators when you're trying to determine whether to accelerate a player, but I also think you need key performance indicators when you're trying to evaluate performance, because you can measure lots of different aspects of our sport, and create very good metrics that help support maybe things that the eye may have missed. Sometimes you get metrics and you go, okay, well, that's exactly what I saw on the field, and it validates. But I think it's highly valuable information that you need to develop as a coach, and I think it needs to be based on a few things. What do you value?
Yes.
Because if you value certain actions, measure them. What is your identity, and how can you measure that identity using objective data? And then the third part is, once you know what you want, it's how you're going to capture it. How are you going to, what tools you need, what technology you need. But again, I think it's highly valuable. Then evolving on metrics is, once you've collected data over time, you start to see positional norms, team norms. You start to see which players hit certain benchmarks and were successful, maybe moved on to higher levels. You didn't have that. Again, when I said benchmark performance, you have that metrics that you can refer to in terms of legacy data to help inform, how you develop players, and maybe how you springboard some, because they're showing indicators that they are pushing on to another level.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Brilliant, Joey. We have another question here in the group chat. So they said the positional info was very good. His question would be around, how much would you take into account a player's long-term development in terms of a player's position compared to his or her success at their current level? So it's simply put, playing a player out of position for the betterment of their long-term career.
Yeah, I definitely think when you're working in development, that's a key thing. I do feel you can't just pigeonhole a player in a position just because they're maybe the fastest kid on the team and you put them up front, and they're able to score quite frequently just based off pure speed. But maybe moving them in a midfield position where now they're having to receive in different positions, taking different pitchers.
Yes,
it's obviously going to help build their overall game understanding and skills. So development stage, for sure, I think it's important. I think in older age groups, I feel like it's trying to find out what is the right position for that player to get them to be excellent
yes,
at what they're doing. I mean, that's a big thing for us as coaches, and I think that's what we're probably sometimes even trying to understand throughout the season, because again, you want at that level to get players performing consistently match after match, and the only thing where it gets a bit gray is you might have players that are what John would call hybrid players, where they can play multiple roles, and that's fine. That means that they have probably a well-rounded four-corner competency that allows them to do that. But I think when you're dealing older level players, specializing positions key. You may need them to play a different role because of injuries or tactics for a game, but I think try to get them to have one dominant and make them excellent at it.
Yes. Okay. Very good. We have another question from Jamie Texera. Joey, could you briefly talk about your experience using the drone, the men's national team training? Is it cost effective for clubs, and would you recommend it as a coaching and player development tool?
It is. It's great because you get a bird's eye view of everything. So when we would review our training sessions, we'd even, if we could, film some games with the drone. It was the best vantage point that I think you can get. It's cost effective because it's a one-time fee, and you don't have to pay for any sort of administrative fees or processing fees in terms of footage. So I highly recommend it. It's not that hard to actually operate. So
Mhm.
I think it's a great tool, and it's cost effective. They're normally about 2,000 to 3,000.
Mhm. And from a player standpoint, watching your training footage or game footage, it's tremendous to be able to see that relationship. And to your point, the distances between, it's a game changer for sure. I really enjoyed when you guys started implementing that with our women's national team. Okay, that's fantastic. I believe that's the end of the questions. I'm sure there'll be more and people will reach out to you. Uh, we have another one here. So let's see. Did you see? Oh, so Joey, when you were working with Alfonso Davies and analyzing some of his games, did you see him excel? Like, could you have predicted that he would have excelled so quickly as he has at Bayern?
It's, you know what, we knew he was the real deal. I think that's the best way to describe it. We knew he was the real deal, and that he had big potential. So I'd say we knew he had it in him.
Yeah.
We just didn't know how long it was going to take for him to reach that
Mm-hmm.
at Bayern. I think what's been great for him is that he was patient. He went there originally and was part of Bayern 2 at points. Spent some time, on the sideline and got minutes here and there sporadically. But I know every time he came into camp, he was positive. He was loving it in Germany. Obviously, the training environment was world class.
Yes.
And after getting year one under his belt, you know, I'm motivated.
Might have lost you there. Hello, hello. Thank
Than week out. So I'd say we need the real deal.
Amazing. Yeah, I can only imagine his key performance indicators, one being speed. Pure speed was unbelievable. So very, very good. I think you're frozen, Joey, but listen, thank you so much for your time. Again, questions will definitely come your way, I'm sure, afterwards. A lot of people personally know you who are on this call, but again, thanks for that wisdom. I called it a master class, really putting all of our thoughts into a very organized and succinct presentation. So thanks again, everybody who joined us. Thank you. Have a wonderful rest of the week, and we can't wait to see you again next Wednesday at 2:00. We'll be speaking with Dimitri Rezvan at MSA. Joey, thank you. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Carm. Thank you, Eva. Take care.